Hello and welcome everybody to today's video and to my review for the race weekend that was in Hungary. And a fitting send-off, the last one before the summer break. We get a few weeks off. It seems like the early part of the season has just flown by. Perhaps it's just my advanced age speaking there. It seems like everything's going by a little bit quicker nowadays, but a good race out there. Definitely thought it wasn't really on the level of maybe a Germany or an Austria, but had a lot of interesting strategy calls. Definitely some things to pay attention to throughout the race. I thought what a weekend from Williams too. It was great to see them get a little bit closer. But another win for Lewis Hamilton. Ominous. Looks like his title defense is going to go pretty well for him. I can definitely see him winning that title at the end of the year, and hopefully it'll be closer than it looks right now. But a great strategy call from Mercedes, inspired decision. Like Verstappen said, it was really because he was in second, he had the freedom to make that call, make that decision. I do think that the Red Bull team could have reacted a little bit quicker, maybe not right away, but maybe put him on the softs around the 15-second gap mark. Just box him. Then at that point he would be 4 seconds behind, but then Hamilton's on the medium tires, Verstappen on the soft, and with the laps that Verstappen put in on those soft tires, I think you definitely could have made a case for him potentially being able to catch Hamilton at that point. So I would have made the call to bring Verstappen in. I think there was no way that those tires were going to last to the end, and I mean, they completely disintegrated with about 3 laps to go, and he ended up having to box for the softs anyway. So definitely something I would have looked into as Red Bull. I wouldn't be too happy about it if I was Max. But then again, I mean, at one point Lewis wasn't too happy with the decision to pull him in. So definitely not 100% cut and dry, and I'm sure that Red Bull would have their own reasons why they didn't pull Max in. But yeah, great race from Hamilton. It's looking like Verstappen is going to charge into a second place and maybe give Hamilton a run for their money near the end of the season. We hope to see that, I mean. And it seems as though the Red Bull car this year is paradoxically different from the Red Bull cars of the past that we're used to. Usually you'd have your handling tracks, I would say, the 4 or 5 tracks on the schedule that Red Bull always seem to do better at, just because of the construction of their car, but they're always known as less of a power car. This year with Honda, they've made such amazing steps in the power side of things that they're really closing that gap on the straights. And even Hamilton was discussing how it seemed as though the Red Bull was a lot quicker on the straights than it used to be in Hungary. And it's definitely more of a Red Bull track, that Hungary track. And I think that where Red Bull have made those gains in high-end top speed to sort of fight with the Mercedes, I think the Mercedes has made incredible gains in those slower speed corners, some of the more technical parts of the track. That's where the Mercedes was really flying in the qualifying. It was that sector 2 at Hungary, and that's a very technical part of the course. Different elevation changes, different types of corners, really working the car and displaying the balance and the handling of the car on the track. So interesting to see that while one has made power unit gains to try to close the gap, Mercedes has sort of made those handling gains to help reduce the closing of the gap, if that makes sense. And speaking of that gap, Ferrari this weekend, where, I mean, if there's a Formula 1 and there's a Formula 1.5, which is the midfield fight, I would call Ferrari Formula 1.25. They were a minute clear or more of the 2 front runners, really not even in the same race, and they were like a minute clear of the lapped markers behind them, the Formula 1.5ers. So interesting to see that. I think Ferrari's really going to be disappointed with their lack of pace. I don't know if it was a setting thing or maybe an issue with the tires, issue with the course, but they just looked nowhere really. And Ferrari has the team, they have the budget to really push, and I feel like whatever they've done this year, in my opinion, I think that they go way too far towards the low drag power car, the Monza car, the Canada car. Those kind of circuits really seem to suit them, but they definitely need to look at the balance and getting sort of, as we were just discussing with Mercedes, advancing in that area really to bring the car a little bit closer to the Formula One top of the grid that they're supposed to be fighting with. In fifth, you had McLaren. Carlos Sainz managed to get that home in fifth. Great race from him. Great weekend for McLaren. Once again, I mean, it's a team that nobody really saw coming, and they just continue to score points. They continue to do well, and it's great to see from them. Such a storied team, and good to see them returning to where they were maybe around the mid to late 2000s. And Pierre Gasly comes home in sixth. I think that's exactly where he should be. Some would argue, yeah, but there was a McLaren ahead of him, and he should have been in fifth ahead of the McLaren. I think if he can come home sixth every weekend, that's fairly reliable points from Gasly. Do I think he's doing well? No. Am I scared for his future? Yeah, for sure. Raikkonen just continues to do Raikkonen things. Great weekend from him, and just solid all around, as Raikkonen always is. Bottas ends up finishing 8th. He had the 2 clatterings on the first lap. Ended up losing a bit of wing. Did a good job to get it back into the points, but I mean, it is Mercedes, and it does have the pace to get there. You don't really have to wave a magic wand to get that Mercedes to perform as it should. Once again, McLaren with Lando Norris finishing inside the top 10, and Alex Albon and that Toro Rosso closing out the points positions. Pretty miserable weekend for Racing Point. Miserable weekend for Renault, Haas. Danny Kvyat kind of fell down to earth after his podium in Germany. And George Russell, great for the Williams team, finishes in 16th ahead of 2 cars on track, and of course his teammate Kubica in the Williams. So that's amazing to see that they're actually making the progress. I thought for sure that Russell had a Q2 appearance coming, and it was just by that half a tenth that he missed out. I was just floored. I felt for him at that point. It would have been such a huge step, but
it's just good to see that Williams team making those positive steps in the right direction, and I hope for more of that after the summer break. Hopefully they can implement some upgrades and maybe get a little bit closer on average to the rest of the pack. So overall, great race. Interesting strategy games out there. Definitely not on the level of the last 3 races, but definitely not a snooze fest either. And I think that the last 4 races bode really well for F1 going into the final part of this season. I think with the way that people were talking about F1 through the first, let's say, 6, 7, 8 races, that it was boring, that it wasn't worth watching. There were a lot of people griping a little bit about it, and I think that this last couple races, the last 4 races, have done a great job to restore the excitement in a lot of people's minds. I think we're really seeing the young guys come to the fore, and some of the older guys still bringing excellent efforts when they need to. So I think it'll be exciting to see how the season plays out. Obviously, the summer season is also a bit of a silly season in terms of contracts, driver movement, stuff like that. I'm not really expecting there to be as many as there were last year. Last year was quite extensive in terms of the changes that were taking place, and it seemed to be up in the air right up until Abu Dhabi. Some teams still hadn't really announced what their driver lineup was, even though most people could predict out to see what they might be. So it'll be interesting to see who moves and who stays. I'll definitely do any driver movement that happens. I'll do a quick video about it, probably discussing it, unless we get a couple back-to-back, and then I might make a longer video that includes multiple different contract offers and negotiations. So it'll be exciting to see where it goes and to see what happens in the time after the return. I know that Spa is always a really good race, generally puts up some great racing. It's one of my favorite tracks in general, so we're hoping that we'll get a great race for that. It tends to always add some weather to the equation as well, which as we've seen in Germany, weather can add quite the element to a race. So thank you all for joining. I hope that I'll be able to make a couple videos over the break. Hopefully there's enough news to talk about, and thanks for making this first half of the season a memorable one for me. Just adding an extra layer of excitement in the sense that I get to talk to and enjoy communicating with an audience, especially considering how insightful and kind a lot of people have been, and the back and forth that I've had in the comments, especially on the Gasly video, have been really entertaining to me. I'm the type of person that really likes to argue, not necessarily any negative connotations to that, but I do enjoy a good debate, and it was nice to see people responding and also responding in a civilized manner. I think that fortunately there's not enough of that in the world these days. So definitely thanks for making this a great experience for the first half of the year, and I'll hope to have plenty of more videos coming through the rest of the year and into this foreseeable future for you. Once again, have a great day. Thanks so much, and goodbye.